those look like the right slides. Hello, everybody. Thanks very much. I haven't done this for a while. It's been, I think, 3 years or something, or slightly more. And so I'm going to try and take it nice and easy. I've probably only got 2 stories to tell today, but I think hopefully they're quite interesting. And I've probably forgotten the order of my slides, so it's probably going to be a bit of a roller coaster ride for me as well as for you, but let's see how it goes. All right, so I have been with the BMJ since 2020, joined in the middle of the lockdown, in the middle of the pandemic. But the BMJ has been around since 1840 as a scholarly journal. And I think, really kind of the story of my talk today is, if we're thinking about diversification of our businesses, I think BMJ has actually done quite well in doing that, given constraints that we have, the kind of organization that we are. And I'm going to draw out 2 stories about where we have diversified our business, and then hopefully have plenty of time for questions afterwards. But even at the very beginning, the revenue model for BMJ had a kind of advertising basis to it. So from the very beginning, its business model was somewhat diverse. We are owned by the British Medical Association. And so we have that kind of very typical ownership structure that you get with an organization that is very much like a society publisher. Our owner is a union. And I think one of the things that constantly surprises me is we only spun out as a separate entity in 2003. And up until 2003, the whole publishing wing was run out of an office as part of the BMA. So we've kind of been evolving our relationship with our owner, but only recently in the last couple of decades, given we've been around since 1840. And one of the consequences of that kind of ownership structure is we have a dividend expectation to our owner. And if you look at these numbers here, the blue bars, one way you can diversify your portfolio is you can just go out in the market and you can buy new things. You can just purchase new companies. And so blue here effectively are the amounts of monies, percentage-wise, of investment that some of these organizations make in those kinds of acquisitions. But you'll see that for us, we don't really have that leverage to do that as an organization. And part of that constraint comes from the kind of ownership structure that we have. So the orange line there is what you'd call organic investment, where you take the project funds or the project pots that you have and you try and grow your existing market. So you try and do product development on IP that you own yourself. And that's where most of our portfolio development has come from over the last sort of 20 years or so. So it's an interesting constraint, and I think it's a kind of constraint that many organizations in our space feel. But I would say if you get the chance to up the blue, it is a very fast way to diversify your portfolio, and I highly recommend doing that. Nonetheless, as I said, we have diversified. I got OpenAI's DALL-E to make this image for me, so it's an attempt at innovation there. And we are what I would describe as being a portfolio company now. So each of these things here is a different business line or business unit or product that we have in market. And there's like more than 10 there. So that's my proof that we're diversified in terms of business model as an organization. And I wanted to show you some of the revenue split that we have across our portfolio. So we have diversified, but you can see that most of the revenue is still coming from our journals business. But nonetheless, we have begun to diversify the base of our revenue as an organization. And as I showed earlier, the BMJ started off with advertising. So of that, 15% of the overall company revenue. And I make the distinction here. The BMJ is the business line for that one title that we have that is very well known, the BMJ, that one journal. And the journal's revenue line is for the rest of our journal portfolio. And the BMJ revenue is split between advertising revenue and subscription revenue. So if we just think of the advertising revenue as part of our diversified portfolio, probably this is roughly where that split is. So we're kind of like sort of 70-30, 60-40. I think that's good evidence. So what I'm hoping to convince you of here is, yes, we have diversified our portfolio and our business lines as an organization. Okay. And of that revenue, about 65% of it is coming from international sources. And this number is really helpful when you have insane currency fluctuations. So it's really helpful. So for us, we're sitting back looking at this roller coaster ride going, is this good? Is this bad? We're quite protected. It's quite good. Most organizations, I think, should be aiming for a very diverse revenue spread globally. But the fact that we have British in our title, I think this is a testament to how we've gone out and expanded our markets. And I think we're really proud of the work that we've done there. And so this is kind of like just a bit of a look at some of the history of where that diversification started in our product portfolio. And I added in the little red line because our first website was in 1995, and I think it's quite nice. And the takeaway from this, I would say to you, is really probably that diversification starts around about 2003, around about the time that we were stood up as a separate entity. So we've had close to 20 years of trying to diversify our portfolio. A lot of those are quite aligned with the journal kind of work, but BMJ Best Practice launching in 2009 was quite a significantly different kind of product. So probably maybe 20 years of trying this. And I think the best time to diversify your portfolio is many years ago, and the second best time is today. So get started. All right. So what I hope I've shown is we have, as an organization with some capital constraints, with some interesting structures in terms of ownership, still nonetheless managed to diversify. What I want to talk about now are two of the tools that you can bring to bear to help you think about how to place more diverse bets in the kind of business that you operate. And the two that I'm going to talk about in the rest of the talk are mission, firstly, and then secondly, latterly, I'm going to talk about the importance of being able to utilize audience and drive audience to help support some of those experiments. So our mission is to make a healthier world. Actually, it's quite a broad mission statement. It's very hard to get your hands around it. How do you evidence that you're creating a healthier world? And we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to try and ground that a bit more. It's a bit cut off here, but we're looking at things or activities that we can do that provide better evidence, better decisions, or better systems of healthcare, and mapping each of those to areas of activity that could actually move the needle. And in each of those areas, if we can have evidence that those are happening, they should lead to a healthier world overall. So, and we've had impact in the past. So we published the discovery of chloroform in 1847. I nicked these slides off of someone yesterday. I thought they were pretty good. We published about antisepsis in surgery in 1867. Oh, sorry. The link between the mosquito and malaria was published in the BMJ. The link between smoking and cancer, even though we did run a lot of advertising for cigarettes in the past. So, and this is sort of this is our impact framework that we're working with now. I'm not going to talk through this, but I think the point about this mission is, if you think about the mission that you have as an organization, that mission gives you the kind of landscape that it makes sense for your organization to play in around the kinds of things that you should do. And I think it's really important because you will have a natural affinity to some kinds of markets, some kinds of partners. You want to stay true to what you're doing as an organization. You want your staff to be motivated by that. But it's also quite wide. There are a lot of different kinds of things that you potentially could do. And so I'm going to take a few minutes now talking about one area of activity that we took on from about 2016. And DTRA is the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. It's a branch of the US military. And they had an interest in improving the strength of medical systems in the Balkans and in the Caucasus to support doctors to be better able to deal with biological and chemical threats. And this was starting in around about 2016 for, if you remember the geopolitical situation, some pretty obvious reasons. And we bid for that work with them. And if you look up DITRA and BMJ, you can even find online like a contract to the value of $30 million. And so DITRA, and that is tiny for DITRA in terms of the amounts of money they spent. And so we put together a network of healthcare professionals in those regions, and we took some of our core medical resources around how to treat those kinds of conditions or issues. We went through the work of translating it into Azerbaijani, Georgian, into Ukrainian, into Russian. We created sections of our best practice portal dedicated to those regions. And we worked with the healthcare bodies to roll out training programs and measured the effectiveness of the clinicians' understanding of those types of interventions in those areas. And so I think we were very effective in trying to deal with the mission of DITRA in that scenario, whilst providing high-quality, validated healthcare information into that region. But it was a big lift for the organization and quite a different lift. Definitely aligned with mission, but very different kind of work to take on as an organization. And it generated a lot of quick revenue for BMJ, and we were able to use that revenue to help support some of our other product development. In particular, we used some of that revenue to continue the ongoing development of our clinical decision support tool best practice. And on the back of that, we thought to ourselves, actually, maybe this kind of business is an interesting diversification opportunity for us. This type of business of going out and trying to deliver these global health programs with large partners. And so we spun up a small group inside of BMJ to see if we could find other opportunities, because we've basically had, the clinical specialism, we had the brand awareness, we had the ability and power to convene at national level. But what we found in trying to pursue that as a line of business for BMJ was that we're still quite a small organization. And we were competing with some of the very largest consultancies in that space who would be going into regions and not only offering global health programs at state level, but also large infrastructural pieces or pieces around their educational system or governance. And effectively, we were not able to compete with those other kinds of vendors in those kinds of markets. So it was a good type of work for us to pursue from the mission perspective. It gave us a lot of opportunity in the period of time that the contract existed. But the contract was very lumpy. It was one key customer, a number of very large contracts over a very specified period of time, but incredibly hard to find that as a repeatable source of revenue. And so in the end, we had to step back from that attempt to work in that kind of way. And we learned a lot from that. And a couple of the things that we learned is the importance of trying to find business models that have that kind of nice, what we call high quality revenue, repeatable, high quality. The subscription models in journals is the classic example of that. But if you can get a long-term partnership going, you have more confidence on the future of that revenue stream, and you can understand the margins and the effort that you put into those products much better. So DITRA gave us a lot of opportunity, but we also learned a lot from that. And one of the things that we did on the back of our experiences with DITRA is double down more on the partnership work we do. And so rather than trying to roll out global health programs, now what we do is we work with partners like these and use our convening power to bring experts together. And so in particular, the one in the middle, the WISH Foundation, the World Innovation Summit for Health, we've run a number of events with them and run a number of special collections with them. And that is a much more repeatable kind of business because you can go in and have a series of events that you plan, and the revenue is not that kind of lumpy one-off revenue. So we have an example here of where we were pursuing things that were in the wheelhouse of our mission, used our expertise, but in the end, that type of business model didn't work, but it's turned into a different kind of business model with some of the same expertise. And so we kind of pivoted a bit, and this is now quite exciting for us. Okay. Right. We are going to be at lunch well before lunch is ready, but that's okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about audience. I'm actually nearly done with my talk, but that's okay. And I want to talk a little bit about careers. So careers are job listings on our website. And we had this kind of picture with our careers business. So careers are basically publish job ads at the back of the BMJ, pay for those job listings. That's the business model. And for many years, the revenue in that business model was in steep decline. And there was sort of sentiment in the company that this is a dying business. This is a business, and yet it was supporting one of the main revenue lines for the BMJ, so it was a concern. And around about 2019, we made some changes to how we operate that business, both from a business model perspective and technologically how we delivered it to market. And we've been able to turn around that picture, and now it's growing, and it's growing at a rate where the team is actually struggling to accurately predict its financial envelope for the following year. That's good in one way, because they're making more revenue than we expected, but we have a lot of explaining to our board to do on occasion about why that's going so much better than we predicted, and that's a good challenge to have, though. So I'll tell you a little bit about how audience plays into this picture. So on the right here, we have the NHS jobs board. And every job in the NHS has to be posted onto that board. And on the left, we have the BMJ jobs board, where we generate our revenue, most of our revenue now from this careers advertising model. And what we do is every night, we pull a feed of the jobs that are on the NHS jobs board, and we automatically pull that into our back-end systems on our side. And so what's the difference here? Why are we able to generate revenue from exactly the same jobs that are freely available on the NHS jobs board? And the answer is we drive audience to those jobs. And so if you are a hospital network and you want to fill that role, we're going to drive the audience to that job if we post it on our jobs board that they won't actually find or go to on the NHS jobs board because the NHS jobs board is too broad and people are not giving it their attention. And a couple of the things that we did was hook our careers website off of our top-level domain to drive and use that SEO authority to generate that traffic. But at its heart, we bring the audience to the jobs and we monetize the ability to do that. And then the other thing that we did is we had a business model where we needed previously, prior to 2019, organizations would have to pay per job listing. And we switched that business model to be a subscription business model, again, going for repeatable revenue. And in that subscription model, they have an all-they-can-eat model, where if they subscribe to the product for the year, they can post as many jobs as they like. And in fact, posting the job is the job's already there in the back end because we're automatically feeding it in. They just have to flip the switch to make it visible on our site. And that's how we've turned around the financial story for careers within BMJ. And again, it's using the audiences, understanding the audiences, and being able to drive that audience to create the value for the customer. And like if I go back to this picture, that declining revenue, all of that revenue is transactional, all of it. And then we changed the business model in 2019. About 80% of the revenue from our hospital customers, we have hospital and GP customers, but 80% of that revenue is now recurring subscription revenue. So that's a very significant change to the business model. And we also get to know our customers better. We kind of create a double-sided marketplace. We can see from the data which hospital trusts are posting the most jobs in which disciplines. And one of the other things that we're doing with this now, earlier this year, we launched a specialist jobs board for mental health because we could see through the data the huge increase in demand for that. And that's one of the ways that we've helped try to diversify. I've just got one last slide, and then I'm happy to take questions. So this is just on the advertising side, where we have anonymous usage on our sites, we can generate a certain level of CPM for that traffic. But where we can identify that audience as a healthcare professional, we generate about 9x the revenue for the advertising on that. So for us, understanding our audience in more detail has significant value for us as an organization, and that's something we're trying to do a lot better on. So that's it. That's the talk. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Hi, I'm Simon Power from BSI. I was just interested in the first bit around mission, and you talked about BMA or BMJ, and you acting as the convener, bringing together those organisations. What is it about BMA or BMJ that makes you a convener, if you understand my question?
It is our ability to attract the attention of the healthcare professional. So if you want to, like, we're running an event in 2 weeks' time, and we've just confirmed Chris Whitty as one of the speakers at that. So we asked Chris, he said yes. He said yes because we are BMJ. And so the funder who's involved in that, for them, being able to get thought leaders of that caliber to participate in their event helps them drive their funding agenda. And we have the reputation that's been built up since 1840 of being an independent voice behind the doctor with high values of editorial independence and high quality. And so that's the thing that can help drive that. Yeah.
On your careers bit, did you find there was much resistance from your customers in moving from the paper ad model to a subscription model?
No, there hasn't been, no. In fact, I was just sitting next to one of our senior sales execs on that team yesterday, and she said it's a really delightful market to sell into because we're helping them solve their problem. I think the key thing is we're proving to them that we're driving applications, and also the delta in cost is not that great. So, and I think the other thing is we're able to use the data about how many ads they're posting over the course of a year. So we can go into those conversations and say, well, you're probably going to end up posting 15 ads anyway. So actually, if you buy the subscription now, that's going to save you compared to if you purchased on a per ad basis. But where the tricky thing has been is the transactional model was very heavily associated with placing adverts in the BMJ, the print copy, and that attracts or can reach passive job seekers. People pick up the magazine, flip through it. So our subscription model has a component of placements in the magazine as well as the online placements. But the big thing we need to prove now is how can we create systems across all of those products and services I showed you later that can actually kind of replicate that passive job seeking affordability that we have in the print magazine. And that's a piece of work that we're a component of a big piece of work that we're doing to transform the online nature of the main title.
So you've talked repeatedly about being data-driven, and clearly you're getting decent insights. So are you able to tell us a little bit about what the journey's been at the BMJ to become more data-driven, or were you in a great state already?
So you can look at these data maturity models, and let's say they go from a 0 to a 5, where 5 is like nirvana. We're probably we consistently place it around about a 3. And we've got a head of data and analytics, David Hutchinson, who came into the organization about 10 years ago. When he came in, there was no infrastructure. The web analytics was separated across lots of different properties. So we've brought in one person with responsibility for the analytics across all of our properties. We're using Google BigQuery to pull in all of the live analytics there. We have a data warehousing solution. We're using an ETL from a third party because that's easier than doing it ourselves. We have business objects in the back end to do the business reporting. But where we still struggle is there's a lot of infrastructure on the data side, but it's not self-service yet for the rest of the business. We're about just under 500 people, and our data department has generated close to probably 250 custom reports. And many of those reports don't get looked at more than once, and many of them get generated, but they're not quite what the person who was asking for them thought they would be. So we're trying to change a bit of the culture of how those conversations happen between our data department and the requesting departments in the organization. And we're also looking at business objects and asking, should we be moving to a more agile tool to support self-service reporting? But all of those changes are difficult because as with every organization, people keep themselves busy. So we have very little slack in the company for people to just stand back and take a breath. And also, the investment picture is one where we have a finite investment pot every year, and sometimes when you want to make a big shift on one of those pieces of infrastructure, it pushes you outside of what would be comfortable for that. So making those bets and making the case for the value that you create in making those changes is a constant conversation that we need to come back to. Yeah. So yeah, we're probably 3 out of 5. Yeah, but we used to be like 1. Yeah. Yeah.
How long ago were you 1?
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and yeah. Great. Well, look, thank you, everybody. That's really fun. I haven't done that for ages, so it was really nice to think through those stories. And I'd say these are just 2 stories out of the portfolio kind of approach that we've taken at BMJ. And I just thought they were 2 that reflected really well on the focus of this conference. But we're doing a lot of other stuff as well, and I'm happy if anyone wants to come up and grab me to answer any questions you all may have. So thank you very much.